If you chase money, you lose money and your dreams. But if you chase your dreams, as long as you're willing to fail a lot and not give a damn what people think of you, then something wonderful happens, which is, your dreams come true and the money follows accidentally. It always does.
Hey guys, this is another episode of the podcast. Today I have Chris. By the way, I love your shirt, the hashtag Dream Big. Chris, how I came across you was I was on YouTube. So I've been a big fan of Billions for the last few years. I saw your video reviewing the episode 1 of season 1, and I watched the whole video, and it was so crazy how you were able to relate to this TV show that I thought was really sort of fictional, but it seems like there's a lot of truth aspect to this crazy, amazing show, which sort of made it was like, wow, I didn't know this was actually real. But I guess please introduce yourself, tell everyone a bit about your story, maybe a quick summary, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm originally from Canada, grew up just outside of Toronto, came down to the States to go to business school, worked at Goldman Sachs for a couple of years on Wall Street, then came to the West Coast here, San Francisco Bay Area, where I live now, to work in the venture capital sector at a hedge fund called Citadel. Then I started my own hedge fund and venture capital firm, invested in Facebook pre-IPO along with every other VC firm out here. And then I decided that I just want to teach. And during the evenings, I would teach here in the Bay Area at several universities, as well as this place in East Palo Alto called the LEMO Foundation. And in East Palo Alto, the high school graduation rate, is only 40%. And so I taught a lot of these kids for free, of course, and I loved it. And I created this program for them in early 2016. On Saturdays, I would teach them, and I called it an entire MBA in one day. And then on a Sunday, on one weekend in January 2016, I basically just threw up a camera at home and I just talked for 8 hours, and I called it an entire MBA in one course. And I threw it online, and humbly it did well. And I decided, I don't want to go back to work. I don't want to do venture capital anymore. I just want to teach and help as much as I can. Yeah.
What specifically did you teach? What was the MBA topic? Was it like a business, finance, how to buy in like stock trading? Yeah.
What I did was I realized after I did my MBA at Columbia that the most important business concepts they don't teach you in business school. And my friends that went to Harvard Business School, they had the same frustrations in that the most important things they don't teach you in business school, like how to network, how to get a job, how to interview, how to manage your own money. They teach you how to manage other people's money. They also don't teach you how to present, get customers, etc. And so it was frustrating for me. And so what I did was I started writing articles on my LinkedIn profile. And I did that for about 2 years, and I threw it all together into a book that I called, it's right here, it's called 101 Crucial Lessons They Don't Teach You in Business School. And then a magazine, Forbes, picked up on it. And then I just started teaching this stuff. And that's what was in my course called An Entire MBA in One Course, are just important things they don't teach you in business school that you really should know. And so I think that traditional business education is outdated. They teach you stuff that was relevant maybe last century, literally. And an MBA is kind of a waste of money. And so I created my own methodology to humbly teach greatest hits of business practices that I practiced in my career, and based on people I've met in my career, like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, et cetera. And I teach based on real life stuff to humbly help my students. Yeah.
That's amazing. What was your experience like starting and growing your own hedge fund? And was it a tough transition to go from like having a hedge fund to teaching?
Yeah. So what I found with hedge funds, and I've raised and managed over $1 billion in my career, and I was never happy in the hedge fund industry or at Goldman Sachs or even in venture capital. My happiest day was always day one. And I thought, am I clinically depressed? Is there something wrong with me? And I realized it's because I wasn't doing what I was meant to be doing on this planet. I wasn't chasing my passion. And every company I worked for, even in the consulting sector before business school, during my annual review, it was very uncomfortable with my boss. because they would always say, Chris, you're doing a great job, humbly. However, can you spend a little bit less time helping people in different departments, meaning mentoring? And I just couldn't. My answer was always, it's just who I am. It's the DNA fabric of who I am, and I just want to help people. And so I had the guts to say sayonara to the venture capital industry. Thank God, to start teaching, and I'm happy, because I think one of the problems with business in general is that if you chase money, you lose money and your dreams. But if you chase your dreams, as long as you're willing to fail a lot and not give a damn what people think of you, then something wonderful happens, which is, your dreams come true and the money follows accidentally. It always does. And the best entrepreneurs, they don't do it for the money. They do it because they want to put their dents in the universe and really make a difference. And they're long-term focused as well. And they don't care what people think. And I was very insecure when I was younger. I went to Wall Street because I thought, hey, it's prestigious, whatever. I worked at Goldman Sachs, and I just did it for the wrong reasons. And I urge all of your listeners, your podcast viewers, to just chase your dreams and don't give a damn anybody thinks you. And failure is cool. It is. And you'll never amount to much in life unless you fail many, many times. And all the best entrepreneurs have failed, a gazillion times. And that's why they're successful. As Michael Jordan said, I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeeded. So chase your dreams.
Now, on the topic of doing what you love, recently I've been going through like a transitionary period where when I first started business, I sort of just did whatever sort of made money because I just didn't have money. So I just sort of did a bit of everything. And my main thing was e-commerce, sort of building online stores, building online brands. And then the next thing was then sort of coaching, teaching people how to do it, selling sort of courses, 3K packages, and doing a lot of sales calls. And sort of I built that to a point where I was like, okay, now I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to travel. I'm going to figure myself out. And it's been hard to go back to those things. Like I've sort of gone through it. Like I don't enjoy e-commerce as much as I did back then. I don't enjoy jumping on sales calls and trying to convince people of the knowledge and value I can offer, and go through a number game where like 1 in every 3 people might say yes, and the other 2 you would have to follow up over the next few months. So I'm going through this weird period where it's like I'm starting to sort of, I'm burning through my cash reserves, funding this sort of platform I'm building behind the scenes. I don't really want to go back to what I did previously, but I want to sort of do a variation of it that I enjoy. But then, I love teaching people for free. I love just helping people that are really passionate and they want to listen to me. Like I want those type of customers, but I don't want to convince people that I can offer that through sales calls. So I'm going through this weird period of like trying to figure out what I really love doing and trying to remove everything else I don't. Do you have any tips there, Chris?
Yeah, I think ultimately, if whatever product or service you're selling makes people's lives better, then it doesn't feel like a job. It feels like a passion. And I also believe that, a company's success is all predicated on customer service. And you got to be long-term focused for that to become a reality. And so Jeff Bezos, back in the 1990s, when he was first starting Amazon, he always talked about how customer service and profitability are perfectly correlated in the long run. And so if you're obsessed with customer service and really helping your customers and you're very long-term focused, then ultimately you'll be successful, because the bottom line is a company is only as good as its customer service. But if your essence, your being is to help other people through teaching and whatnot, then I say go for it. And you can actually have a pretty profitable and comfortable lifestyle by teaching online. And I feel like my children are the last generation that feel like maybe they should get a university degree. I think that universities are in secular decline. I think by the end of my life, only 50 universities will exist. And so the alternative is learning online. And we're certainly in the early innings or early stages of a multi-decade secular growth story with respect to teaching online. And everybody has something to teach. And so I urge you to look into teaching online. You can use platforms like Udemy, which is one of the platforms I use. Or what you can do is you can teach a lot of the e-commerce stuff that you've learned over the years and put it on teachable.com for free. and then link that from your YouTube channel, which is what I do. Yeah. And so you can use YouTube in your podcasts and other social media platforms as a way to cross-sell and upsell to your products if you want to. Yeah.
Now, Chris, what has been the best way to sort of sell and sort of put out your sort of program or offer? So let's say my YouTube or my content brings in 100 leads per month. Now I can either put 100 leads into 100 45-minute strategy sessions and I'll close 25 at like $3,000 each, and that's really profitable, but takes a lot of time, and the 75 rejections are really, it does not feel good. And the 25 that you got, you have to really convince them that you know what you're doing, even though they've watched all your content. Another process, put the 100 into a VSL, they watch a 45-minute, give an offer, here's a link to pay $1,000 for a course. So you might get like 100 people watch this 45-minute amazing sort of video, and maybe like 5 people might convert, much less, but you didn't have to do any sales calls. You're not jumping on the floor convincing people. And there's obviously other models where you can just go low ticket, sell a course for $50, $20 a month. So like that's sort of where I'm at, trying to, like, I've done a bit of everything, and I want something that I don't have to really sell myself, because I don't love selling. I want to focus on product. I want to focus on the customers that want to work with me. What advice do you have there, Chris?
Yeah, so I would say there's a couple things you can do. So what I do is I sell a lot of courses online with low prices. And so it's kind of like Walmart's EDLP strategy, or everyday low prices. And I use distribution channels from companies like Udemy to sell those products. Now, what I also do is I have an MBA degree program, one of which is called I'm not here to market it. Actually, I'm not going to tell you the branding of it. I'll just talk about it from a generic perspective. Speaking of not wanting to sell. But one of them is like an on-demand version, like Netflix, right? And so that is it's very profitable, very high profit margins. Another version of it, I teach live and I do one-on-one coaching and stuff as well. But I love it though, because I know that I'm humbly helping people, right? And so if you know in your heart that you're helping people with their careers, helping them become happier, more successful, then it's not a job, it's a passion. As Confucius said, find an occupation you enjoy, and you'll never have a job for the rest of your life. So and maybe a different way to think about it is if you tell yourself, and if it's sincerely true, that you're really helping people to improve their lives, then it's not a sales call. It's a passion. And what I always do with my students is I tell them, if I told you that I'm giving you 30 days off and you can't go to work, you can't travel, and you can't go to school, what are you going to do with your time? And whatever that answer is that's your passion, your purpose, your raison d'être. And that should be your career, no matter what anybody tells you. If you do what you love doing and you don't give a damn about failure or what people think of you, and you should never care anyway, then you will live your life in your own terms. That's what we're here for.
That's amazing. How long have you been sort of in the educational space now, Chris? And I guess, what's the vision for the next, say, 5 to 10 years, especially with all the knowledge you've taken away working in the finance world? You must have a different view on education.
Yeah, I think that the old school track of going to Harvard or a decent school and getting a good job is going to be a thing of the past. Because what breaks my heart is a lot of these people that get into these great schools, they get in because their parents went there, or surprisingly, their parents are billionaires or very wealthy, right? So the system is rigged. It's not fair. My favorite type of students are those that are poor, smart, and hungry. I love that. I love helping students that were born with a crappy set of cards in life instead of a silver spoon, and helping them, especially those that want to help themselves. And so my vision, and COVID has kind of pulled forward my vision of the world from an education perspective by about 20 years. And it was the subject of my TEDx talk I gave years ago, which is, everybody is going to be learning online. And there's no point in doing a 4-year undergraduate degree where you have 13 hours of class a week and $100,000 in debt when you didn't learn anything that you can apply in the real world. If you want to be a doctor, of course, go to university, makes sense. But a lot of the top companies in the world don't require university degrees anymore, such as Google, Apple, Facebook, Wells Fargo, IBM. IBM, one of the oldest companies out there. They don't require university degrees. And so I think that you can learn online. And that's my vision of the world. And it's happening faster than I thought, again, because of COVID and people learning over Zoom, et cetera. And so in terms of my outlook for the next 5, 10, 50, 100 years of my life, whatever it might be, is I want to continue teaching. And, the profits from what I do go to build schools. We just built a school in Rwanda for one of my students. We're building another one in Kenya next year, et cetera. And in terms of what am I going to teach, because I've already taught everything there is, I can think of, at least for finance, from banking to hedge fund stuff to options. So what I'm doing next, actually, what I'm working on now, it's kind of fun, is I am working on teaching programming. And I was a programmer years ago when I worked at Accenture, sorry. And so I'm teaching programming using prompts. And so what I'm doing is I'm starting to teach students how to use Excel at first. And for those of you that use Excel, whenever you record a macro, code is created for you in subs. And then these subs go, and this will only work for people watching this podcast, but the subs go into modules here, and modules go into projects. And once you understand the basics of object-oriented programming from a visual perspective, then you can do Python, which I'm going to be teaching as well. And so I'm definitely more of a visual learner. I remember back in the old days, when hundreds of years ago when I was in school, I don't remember what the teacher said, but I remember the props that they used. And I remember show and tell. And we are much more visual today. That's why Instagram is so successful, et cetera, and TikTok. And that's the future of learning as well. It's edutainment, it's props based, and it's VR based as well, which is something I'm looking at as well, metaverse based teaching.
That's amazing. I do know there's a few consultants. We have a small niche of consultants in our sort of audience. How highly would you recommend Udemy? Like, has Udemy brought you a lot of organic students from their own traffic, or have you really had to use your own social platforms to drive traffic to your Udemy sort of products?
Oh, Udemy has been amazing. They're a great partner of mine. They're fantastic. I have, I think, over 1 million paying students from every country on Udemy. My courses have generated more than $10 million in revenue on my own platform as well. So it's been fantastic. It's been great. Yeah. So Udemy is, and I don't get comped or paid to say what I'm about to say, because Udemy is an algorithm. If my courses suck, many of them do, they won't sell. But Udemy in EdTech is Google, and everybody else is Bing. There's nobody else out there like Udemy. Again, they've been a fantastic partner of mine. And nowhere else can you go online to get a gazillion affordable prices from people that have done it instead of learning theoretical crap in universities. There's no other resource like it.
What's your best advice for people who might want to sort of give Udemy a try? Because I know a lot of people host their courses on Kajabi, Teachable, ClickFunnels, and they just sort of use their own marketing to drive traffic to those platforms. What's your best advice to succeed on Udemy? And again, congratulations on all the success on Udemy. Like, those numbers are so inspirational.
I'm humble. I made a lot of mistakes along the way too. What I would say is that the loneliest place in the world is page 2 of Google search rankings. And just creating your own courses and trying to market them yourself is really tough. And so I recommend everybody try out Udemy, and don't give up after one course. Like, it took me about 5 courses before I worked. But just, be yourself. Your delivery is crucial, as well. As Maya Angelou said, people might not remember what you said, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel. And just teach in innovative ways, and just be you, be yourself. And, you either get inspired or try to inspire other people. And everybody has a skill they can teach. Everybody does. Everyone has something to teach. There are people that teach on Udemy and make 6 figures teaching on how to bake bread. Ninja, the big Minecraft streamer guy or whatever, I guess he's into Fortnite now. He started out teaching Twitch actually on Udemy as well. Everybody has something to teach. Yeah, it's a great platform. I recommend everybody try it. Again, I'm not comped by any means by mentioning Udemy stuff because it's an algorithm. Whatever adds the most value from a ratings perspective with students will sell the best. But just don't give up. Don't give up. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Don't just make one course. Go all in. Make 5 or 10 courses, and you will be successful.
That's such a great tip. One thing I've noticed that you're really strong at, Chris, is you're really on top of the social media game. Like your YouTube channel is amazing, and there's not many people your age that's sort of on top of social media like that. I think I wanted to get your thoughts. Like, there's like brands like Kylie Jenner's sort of makeup brand where that's $1 billion company. There's Conor McGregor's drink. I think that was like, that's $1 billion company. The Rock has his tequila. Do you think the days of like doing conversion brand marketing and doing like the Oracle IBM model, like, is it all about social media now?
I think influencers are going to be, it's going to be the next big growth market. It's interesting because they polled a lot of kids that are under 20 years old in the United States on what you want to be when you grow up, and over 80% said influencer. It's so interesting because I look at people like Mr. Beast, who has over 100 million YouTube subscribers, and he is a brand in himself. And so, I think that the business model of the future is people build their own brands online and then sell their own products and services that way. And so Mr. Beast, what he's done is he has his own restaurant chain of hamburgers that are kicking ass, doing really well. There was like a lineup of 10,000 people to go to his first outlet there in New Jersey, East Coast United States. He's selling a candy bar now. And so all these people like the Kylie Jenners of the world, or Kardashians, whatever you want to refer to them as, these influencers, they are the product themselves. And there's going to be product or brand extension based on what they sell next. And it's really frustrating for big companies like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, et cetera, because they're used to paying a fortune in advertising, 10% of the revenue on average every year, in order to get customers. And I think that I think that YouTube is the only gold rush in history where it costs you nothing to make the product. And it's also the only gold rush in history where you can get access to billions of potential customers for free. And I think we're going to look back upon YouTube a decade from now and say, damn it, I wish I had made more content on YouTube, because every little video you release, it might not make much money today or do well today, but I think of them all as little franchises. And so the reason that we're having this conversation today, and thank you so much for reaching out to me, is because of one of my videos, one of my 1,000-something videos, which is the billions one. Yeah. But you got to make it from your heart. It can't just be about making money. You got to do it because it's fun. You enjoy it as well. And you got to tell yourself and be thick-skinned and say, I don't care what people think of me. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I'm going to keep creating content forever. Yeah. And of course, you can repurpose that content to a la Gary V. And so we start repurposing our stuff on Insta, TikTok, et cetera. Yeah. It's just a more efficient way to create.
Each content you create is like a piece of asset that can be used for a long period of time. For every new platform, new feature that comes out, it can be chopped down, expanded, combined into montages. So that's how I've been starting to treat each piece of content, treating it as an asset that I spend time making once, or I pay an editor to make once, but it's going to keep working for me for a lifetime.
Forever, yeah. And so I do a weekly call, my YouTube channel. I'm on week 204 now. And I just do Q&A. It's called office hours. It's a couple hours. And then my team will create the best 7 questions asked to make them blogs throughout the year. Now, what Nintendo has kind of pioneered, and I just a case study on them. So Nintendo, it's the oldest tech company in history, over 100 years. And they've been repurposing content for decades now. Like the 8-bit and 16-bit and 64-bit Mario games. They're on the GameCube, the Wii U, the Wii, as well as, of course, the Switch more recently. But you're totally right. You create it once, and then you get operating leverage kick in because you can just redistribute or repurpose it in different distribution channels. Yeah.
It was crazy. When I first got into YouTube 4 years ago, I was creating content. It was doing really well. Like, I think I had like 15,000 subscribers, and drop shipping e-commerce is really hot. Like, I was able to monetize that for like $300,000, $400,000 a year. So it was like every 10,000 subscribers was worth like at least 100,000 subscribers over a period of a year. And it was weird, like after 2 or 3 of that years of that hot streak, since, with social media, there's ups and downs, it didn't feel consistent. I felt like in order to build a real business, I had to figure out cold traffic. I've had to figure out how to build a sales funnel, how to get leads, phone numbers from Facebook ads, convert them into customers. So I spent a whole year trying to figure out how I could turn people, like reach people who just didn't know who I was and turn them into customers. And I like failed hard. It was so difficult to run a cold ad on Facebook and have that person and build trust with them, where after a week they might spend $3,000. It was so difficult, and it's crazy. I'm coming back full circle, just talking with so many people. Content keeps coming up, brand keeps coming up, and I'm like, man, like now I'm going back and just focusing on content, creating content for YouTube, TikTok, and really doubling down on that. And I was like, if I put all that energy into my content, things would have just blown up even more.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because selling online and advertising online, it's like dating. Like you don't get married after one date. And if you look at traditional commercials, like you don't buy a Toyota car until you've seen 20 Toyota commercials. And it's much more competitive online too, because, there's basically no barriers to entry. Anybody can create content. So it might take you, 30, 40, or 50 videos until somebody actually buys your product. But I really do believe that if you continue to add value online and you enhance other people's lives, if you build it, they will come. But I believe that in order to do that, and this is old school, but email is still the gold standard. And so you have to find a way to get a call to action or a carrot, so to speak, to get somebody to buy one of your products and provide you with an email address. And then you can do email nurturing, email marketing. It takes time. It takes time to build that up. But you can't give up after just, a couple of videos. You got to be all in. It's a marathon, not a sprint, because your competition, and when I say your, I'm referring to all of ours, everybody on this call as well. Your competition will give up after making a handful of videos, right? You got to be a pit bull and a pork chop and just stay in it for the long term. Yeah.
Tell me more about emails, because I know my generation, we're all about just creating content, and a lot of people in my generation has sort of really let email to the side and haven't really focused on it, and you're sort of in between, you're sort of balancing both. Tell me about the power of email, because we have a list of 15,000 customers, and if I blast that list and offer a free strategy session or $1 core, just a promotion, like I might get like 5-10 people take action on that out of the 15,000. Maybe my list is just not high quality enough, but tell me about emails.
Yeah, so I started out using MailChimp years ago, and then eventually we have a very large number of emails, so I moved to ActiveCampaign. And it's pretty sophisticated product. I sent out a weekly email, which highlights 2 of my best performing vlogs in the week, whatever. And then I mention my weekly call, which is it's one day a week. I'm not here to advertise it. And then people get on that call, they ask questions, and, basically my outlook is add value, help people as much as I can. And eventually, it's that whole give and take mentality. Give and you'll receive. It's prophetic. It's been true since the beginning of time, but you got to give with your heart. It can't be about wanting to make money. You have to genuinely want to help people. And in return, as I mentioned earlier today, a company is only as good as its customer service, and customer service and profitability are perfectly correlated in the very long run. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Earlier you mentioned that when you were sort of in the finance space, you were able to sort of talk to giants like Warren Buffett, Bill Gates. Tell me about what that was like. What were they like? What was those experiences? That sounds so cool.
Yeah, it was neat. Warren Buffett was very self-deprecating. He taught one of my classes. He graduated from my school years before I did, but it was great. He taught about value investing, and it was wonderful. It was great to see him. And I remember one of the guys. This was back in 1999. I am that old, last century. And I remember there was a guy I was sitting beside in class that was trying to pitch a tech stock to Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett very gently, grandfatherly, interrupted my classmate 30 seconds into his pitch. And he said, "Son, I'm going to stop you right there, because I don't know where this technology company is going to be in 12 to 18 months from a product cycle perspective. And I only invest in what I understand to keep it simple." And people thought he was crazy. And then 3 months later, he was a genius, because the market peaked, the NASDAQ peaked 3 months later in March of 2000. And so one of the brilliant things about Warren Buffett is not just his ability to pick stocks and be long-term focused, but more importantly, his ability to communicate. And he took a Dale Carnegie course when he was 19. And he doesn't have his Columbia degree on his wall, but he has his Dale Carnegie certificate of completion on his wall. And I recommend everybody take it, the Dale Carnegie course. I took it as well. It's fantastic. Because if you can get comfortable and not give a damn what people think of you when you're up there presenting, that's basically a free way to get customers. And so whenever you watch an interview with Warren Buffett on television, you never ask yourself afterwards, oh my God, I'm more confused now. You get it because he is the quintessential communicator. He can communicate. So that's his specialty, and that's free PR for him as well. Yeah. Of course, he's a great investor, but he's also a great communicator. And I really think that your listeners and all of us, myself included, we need to focus more time on our delivery and a little bit less so on our content. Yeah. And practice a lot too. I used to be terrified of public speaking. I went into the prison system through my church, which helped me to conquer my fear. But you got to run to your fears in business because your competition won't. In terms of Bill Gates, I met him a number of times when I worked in the hedge fund industry. I used to manage software and internet stock portfolios. And so the first time I met him was in 2003 at the annual Microsoft Analyst Day event in Redmond, Washington. And I sat beside him at lunch, and he was very nice to me. I kind of looked up to him a lot. I didn't ask any difficult questions, unlike the hedge fund mafia around me. But one thing I'm really upset about with myself is that and I'm a religious person, and I'm fully transparent with everything. He used the Lord's name in vain a number of times during that conversation in front of tons of hedge funds. And I wish I had corrected him in hindsight. Yeah. So this is me being fully transparent. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. Chris, tell me a bit about what the demographic of majority of your customers are. Are there people that sort of want to learn how to communicate better? Are there sort of business owners that see your wealth of knowledge and they sort of need help on their specific business? Is it a bunch of traders? Or is it a bit of everything?
I think it's just people that want to learn how to start a company, because I've started a bunch, whatever, and I worked in venture capital. It's also people that want to understand, how do professional investors on Wall Street invest? How do you short a stock? How do you invest in venture capital startups, that sort of thing. But I teach every major business topic there is, including cryptocurrency stuff. Yeah.
What's your thoughts on cryptocurrency, Chris?
So I think that most cryptos are a scam. And I've thought this for years. I've been on the boards of crypto companies since 2013. I think that maybe 4 or 5% of cryptos are worth looking at. I think it's a market that needs to have some sort of loose regulation. Before you buy a stock on any major stock market, you get access to an investor offering memorandum. And that's to protect the public. And I will be very critical of government institutions, but I think it's noble when governments try to protect consumers. And so I think we need to have some sort of loose government regulation when it comes to cryptocurrencies. And we're starting to see it as well. Kim Kardashian just got into a little bit of trouble. I'm sure you heard about it for mentioning a crypto without filing first with the government. She's paying over a fine of $1 million. And that's in the United States. And so some governments are starting to regulate cryptos. I'm a laissez-faire guy. I believe in Reaganomics, small governments, but there's got to be some sort of accountability because there are so many scammers out there, and so many of my students have gotten scammed with cryptos. Yeah, and you got to do your research first. And my courses, my MBA programs, whatever, I teach people how to analyze cryptos, kind of like an investment banker would create an S1 filing. You got to do your research, and if you're going to invest in cryptos, make it less than 5% of your liquid portfolio, your liquid net worth, I should say, and never have more than 0.5% of your liquid net worth in any one particular crypto. Now, I think that if the United States government were to have some sort of loose regulation with cryptos, it'd be incredibly bullish for the crypto market because there's a lot of governments that are outlawing cryptos because cryptocurrencies are the biggest threat to national security in a lot of countries. And the reason I say that, and the more left-wing governments, it saddens me that so many governments are moving towards the left post-COVID. It's terrible. But I think that the way that governments are never run like businesses. Governments will issue bonds. They'll sell bonds to the public. In return, they'll get cash. that they'll either take out of circulation to raise interest rates, or they'll use those proceeds for, to build bridges, not walls, and maybe to build up the military, et cetera. And so if you take that fiscal policy tool away from governments, and hypothetically speaking, if we assume that people are only going to use cryptos in the future, then all of a sudden governments can't raise money, to defend themselves. And that's why the more left-wing countries in the world have been outlawing cryptos. I don't think it should be outlawed. I'm a capitalist, but I still think there should be some sort of loose regulation.
Chris, talking about the market and printing of money, what's your thoughts on the current market at hand? Because I've been following Ray Dalio. He's been talking about the whole 200-year cycle, and apparently we're near the end, and talking about how usually towards the end, the reserve currency becomes replaced with another reserve currency. And I'm hearing how people are forced to buy oil in the Russian sort of currency, and there's a lot going on. It feels like, I don't know what to believe. What's your thoughts on the global market at the moment?
Yeah, don't let Ray Dalio scare you. So Ray Dalio, of course, he's a brilliant man. I have a lot of friends that work for him. He talks about principles and how to manage people, but the reality is, at his hedge fund, every single meeting is recorded between every person except for in the bathrooms. And the annual turnover rate there is about 40%. Yeah. Now, when it comes to, he's a great stock picker, but there's a famous quote, and I'm going to butcher it, which is, the economists have successfully predicted 20 of the past 75 recessions. Don't let that fear you at all. Yeah. Now, in terms of the current market environment, we're in a precarious situation because the United States government is trying to fight inflation. They keep raising interest rates. The problem is unemployment keeps going down. And so the monthly unemployment number, which you saw came out last Friday, came out at 3.5%. That's down from 3.7%. And usually when you raise interest rates aggressively, which is what's happening, unemployment goes up. And so the United States government, the Federal Reserve, they're going to keep raising interest rates until unemployment goes up to mid to high single digits. And so that's not great for the equity markets, obviously, when rates go up. And so it's something we haven't seen before. The previous inflation cycle, which was much more egregious than the current one in the early 1980s, Paul Volcker, he was the head of the Federal Reserve in the early 80s. He increased interest rates to about 20% to fight inflation. And he was successful in getting unemployment to spike well above 10%. And it's sad to say, and I don't want anybody to lose their jobs, but the Federal Reserve will keep raising interest rates until unemployment spikes. And the problem is that the two biggest inputs into producing any product are, number one, labor. Of course, we've got tighter labor markets now, it's getting tougher. And number two, the price of oil. And given what that prick Putin has done, is kind of hurt the global economy, not to mention, more importantly, the loss of life. And so, we would have had a soft landing for the global economy earlier this year. And then, in February, Putin decided to start Cold War Part 2. And I don't think that's going to end anytime soon. My kids asked me back in February, Dad, they said, how long is this war going to last? And I said, decades. This really is the second Cold War. And Putin knows that, his economy is kind of meaningless compared to how big Russia or the old USSR used to be as a percent of global GDP. And he knows that it's only a matter of time until the world doesn't really use as much oil. And so he's using that as his currency right now. And there's a famous Saudi Aramco executive who once said, the Stone Age did not end because they ran out of stones. And so he's using, oil as a weapon right now to fund his disgusting wars. And he did his, people don't realize that Putin did his thesis when he did his undergraduate degree in geology. And his thesis was, how strong could the USSR at that point in time be if they controlled the bulk of the world's natural resources? And that's exactly what he's trying to do right now. And so the economic impact of what Putin has done so far by early 2023 will be, over $2 trillion. And, a lot of people understand that we all have to support Ukraine. We all do. And, sending billions of dollars on a monthly basis from first world countries or other countries, whatever, to Ukraine is the right thing to do. Number one, to protect human lives. And number two, if we don't do it, the economic impact in 5 or 10 years will be $10 trillion. And so from a financing perspective, billions of dollars every month is nothing compared to the long-term implications. And if we don't stand up to Putin and the whole world doesn't, berate him for what he's doing, then what's next? Is China allowed to invade Taiwan? God, no. So now is the time to stand up for human rights. Yeah. And so it's kind of a dark period in human history. My entire life, since I was born in 1972, the whole world has been moving away from communism. And then since COVID, a lot of countries are moving way too far to the left, right? And please don't get me wrong, I'm not a right-wing nut. Maybe I'm more of a libertarian. I believe in freedom of the individual. I hate and despise anything that will stop my students from being able to reach their full potential in life. And that's what communism is. And I'm glad that, many countries are getting together and not recognizing or not supporting Putin's intentions of trying to reassemble the USSR, which is what he's going to do. And I think what comes next is he goes after Kazakhstan's and other countries and whatnot and tries to reassemble the USSR, unless we all step in. And in terms of him threatening, nuclear retaliation, those are empty threats. And during the Cold War in the 70s and 80s, and I remember growing up, we were all fearful of the bomb and all that stuff. But at least back then we knew, like we know now, that, the Russians are rational. They understand that it's mutual destruction. Unlike the, Al-Qaeda or Taliban, where they're really not very rational. I think Putin is rational in that respect. And so I think we have to keep supporting Ukraine to bankrupt Russia so that he can't keep invading other countries. And all of his empty threats when it comes to nuclear retaliation are just that, empty threats.
Chris, why are oil prices going up? Where's majority of the world's oil sort of supply from? And does Russia have a hold of that? Is that why prices are going up?
Yeah, so the United States is actually the largest producer of oil in the world. A lot of people don't realize that. However, the United States is a massive consumer of oil as well. So OPEC has gotten together and they have cut supply. And, it's some people will say, OPEC, what you're doing is you're basically supporting Russia. I'm a capitalist. I mentioned 18 million times already in this call. That being said, if you're an OPEC member and say you're country X and your constituents, your citizens are starving, of course you want to raise the price of oil. I get that. But I think what's happening now is there's going to be significant tension between the United States and Saudi Arabia for what's happened. Biden has kind of telegraphed that already. And in hindsight's 2020, but I'm sure the Biden administration and the Trump administration kind of question their strategy of pulling troops out of Afghanistan. Because if you have troops in Afghanistan, then it kind of keeps the Soviet Union, or Russia, I should say, in check. And it did for decades. But now you've destabilized that region. And look what's happening with Iran. Iran is now supplying drones, in this awful war. The Iranian government is basically killing people in Ukraine. It's ridiculous. But in Iran, you're starting to see a lot of people rising up. And I hope there's more political unrest there as well, with minimal casualties, so that freedom can prevail. So
right now, does America still have ties with Saudi Arabia? Is Saudi Arabia still selling and supplying the United States with oil, or are they...
Oh, no, of course they are. Yeah, they are. But Saudi they just cut production, right? They're voting with their wallet.
Is there a possibility that as we increase interest rates, inflation slows down and we don't have to keep increasing interest rates to a point where unemployment hits high single digits, or is there a need for that?
No, eventually it will slow the global economy and put us into a recession. Yeah, and they have to do this because if you don't raise interest rates, then you don't have an economy. There's lots of historical examples of this. Back in September of 2008, Zimbabwe had daily inflation of 98%. Venezuela a couple of years ago, they had daily inflation of 1,000,000%. They had to cancel the fuerte, which ironically is Spanish for the word strong. And of course, post World War I, you had Germany, where you had to actually get wheelbarrows full of Deutschmark or whatever the currency was at that point in time and bring it into market just to buy a loaf of bread. If you have rampant inflation, you don't have an economy. And the Federal Reserve will continue to raise rates aggressively until unemployment spikes to between 5 and 10%, and until we see prices come down. Yeah, these are uncharted waters. Like, we've never seen this before, where the labor market is this tight. Yeah, and interest rates are rising. Yeah, but economies are always cyclical, right? We're now in the downdraft right now, and the government will keep raising interest rates until, yeah.
Interesting. What's your thoughts on one thing? I think it was maybe from Warren Buffett, but he was talking about how when it comes to investing and hedge funds, 95% of hedge funds can't outcompete the S&P 500. And if that's the case, why doesn't everyone just invest into the S&P 500, like just invest in top 500 stocks, copy the ratio, just buy that sort of that sort of ETF? Why do people give their money to hedge funds? How are hedge funds still a thing if 95% of them can't beat the S&P 500?
Yeah. So let me kick it off with mutual funds. So mutual funds, 90% of mutual funds underperform the ETFs and the S&P 500. Because with mutual funds, there's tons of embedded fees. Plus, when you get your tax bill from a mutual fund, if you made money in a given year, you're going to pay more taxes than if you just held an ETF. And the reason is because in most countries, capital gains taxes are higher if you make money and you profit within a given year. And you have a lot of portfolio managers at top mutual funds that will chase performance into year end, which means you'll pay higher taxes because there's more short-term capital gains. So why are they still relevant when ETFs outperform them? Because these mutual fund companies have billions and billions of dollars in advertising every single year, and they've got lobbyists as well. But investors are waking up. They get it. Like, investors are buying more ETFs now, which is why correlation between stock movements are at all-time highs. Because buying ETFs pushes all stocks up and vice versa, instead of paying a mutual fund manager, that ridiculous fees to outperform. And so mutual funds are in secular decline. In terms of hedge funds, it's a little bit different. So hedge funds, so a hedge, if you think of a hedge in your backyard, it protects your backyard, right? And so it's protecting capital. And really, really rich people that invest in hedge funds, and you have to have a liquid net worth of $1 million to be an accredited investor and invest in hedge funds in most countries. But really rich people, the wealthy people, they're interested in, number one, capital preservation. Number two, generate positive returns. And so people that invest in hedge funds, they don't mind underperforming the benchmarks, but they mind if they lose a lot of money in down years. And so it's all about capital preservation. Now, in terms of mutual fund performance, since 2002, it's gone down dramatically. And the reason it's gone down dramatically is Eliot Spitzer, who was the governor of the state of New York back in 2002. He created something called Regulation FD. And what Regulation FD means, it's fair disclosure. Regulation fair disclosure means that retail investors like you and myself and everybody in this call, we can get access to the same information at the same time that all the hedge funds and mutual funds do. It's against the law for a publicly traded company to provide any kind of stock information to a hedge fund or mutual fund, unless it's on a publicly disclosed webcast. So all of us retail investors globally can get access to it. And so what's happened is a lot of hedge funds have been underperforming since then because they don't have edge. They don't have insight. And the ones that do outperform month after month after month after month, a lot of them are breaking the law. And the Obama administration went after a lot of them, post 2008 and 2009. And I think they should be more aggressive going after hedge funds as well. Now, if you're going to invest in a hedge fund, I recommend only investing in hedge funds that are long-term focused. So Julian Robertson pioneered the industry. God bless me, just passed away. He pioneered the industry back in the 80s by founding a hedge fund called Tiger. And Tiger was so successful that what happened was a lot of portfolio managers and analysts that worked at Tiger in the 80s and 90s, they left to start their own companies. And those are called Tiger Cubs. And those are great hedge funds to invest in because, just like Julian Robertson, their investment time horizon usually is 3 to 5 years. Yes, they trade around positions, but they're long-term focused. And as Warren Buffett said, the longer the view, the wiser the intention. And day trading is not a career. Yeah. You can't make a career out of day trading because each month has 20 weekdays, meaning 20 days when the markets are open. And you get fooled by randomness. You'll have black swan events or rare events occur that cause stocks to go up and down. You got to be long-term focused.
Interesting. So would this be a good strategy for someone that was like a millionaire? where if they didn't want to put all their money into the S&P 500 because that's very US heavy and basically you're betting on the United States, and there is a slim chance that maybe the United States isn't there for the long term, could they just simply invest in the S&P 500, the top 100 Australian companies, the ASX 100, something in Europe, something in Asia, and basically just invest in ETFs all over the world, and that would probably yield a similar return, if not higher, than hedge funds. And you would have the same risk adverse.
Yeah. Well, all depends also on your currency exposure and tax mandates. So for example, in most countries like Australia, Canada, et cetera, I'm from Canada originally, there are tax mandates so that for your retirement savings program, in Canada it's called RRSP, in America it's called 401k, it's called superannuum. What's it called in Australia?
Superannuation.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. And so there are tax laws whereby a certain percent of that has to be invested in local companies, right? And they do that obviously to help the local economy. And you can't have 100% exposure to overseas markets. So you have to look at taxes very closely as well. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it was such a fun time chatting with you, Chris. Like I saw you've knocked through all the different questions. It was cool how we started talking about broad business things, and then we got into finance, and we got into a bit of politics, and I just love how broad your knowledge and experience is. Like you just have a wealth of experience. It's just a sum of everything you've done in your lifetime. I can definitely sense that.
Well, thank you. I'm over 50. I'm getting older, man. So yeah.
Thank you so much for the time today, Chris. Where can people find more about you, watch your content, learn from you? Where's the best place for my audience to reach?
No, I appreciate that. So there's my website, which is harounmba.com. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Chris. I just love how humble, down to earth you are. I'm really gracious that you've given me this time to talk to you. And I really had a fun time today.
Likewise. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
That's another episode of the podcast, guys. If you guys made it this far, please let me know your thoughts. I really appreciate your time. Please jump on Spotify and Apple, leave a review so I can know what you guys are thinking. Give me some tips that I can work on. And I really appreciate your time this week. Hopefully you guys got value from this episode, and I'll see you guys next week with another episode. Peace.